When you need to get a cover for your comic book, he's the first man you should take a look. His pencils and his inks, they are the stuff of myth. It can't be no one other than Andy Smith. For folks who like the comic art in black and white, Andy's gonna give it to you nice and tight. You're gonna want this art book, it's a fan's delight. And Andy's gonna give it to you nice and tight. Nice and tight, nice and tight. Get nice and tight from comic book superstar Andy Smith. Only on Indigo, go back it today. Yeah, you're gonna get it nice and tight.
The Immortal Mask, a 1970s superhero crime noir adventure, follows a retired soldier turned reporter who is given a coveted interview with a death row inmate. What he learns thrusts him into Atlanta's shadowy underworld. He'll have to use his military training to survive being hunted for possessing the information that could topple the city's most powerful ruling class. This is not a pre-order or a crowdfunding campaign. Get your books now at Denali's.com.
I was sitting all alone in my library chair when I found a book and it gave me a scare. The pages I kept turning, it quite took me in. What was it? Oh, where do I begin? We read the monsters. I read the monsters next door. The monsters. It had short stories galore. The monsters. It's full of horror and gore. The monsters. I read the monsters next door.
Nice and Tight, the comic book pencil art of Andy Smith. That's me. This book features 52 pages of some of my favorite full pencils that I did for other companies over the past 2 decades. The raw pencils as they were seen by the inker, and now you can see them for the first time. This book also comes in a digital format so you can practice your inking in your favorite program. Back it today.
25 seconds to curtain, folks.
It's a Critical Blast podcast. Special guest, Andy Smith.
Welcome, everybody. I am RJ Carter, Senior Managing Editor here at CriticalBlast.com, Chief Envelope Licker for Critical Blast Logistics, myopic proofreader for Critical Blast Publishing, and host of the Critical Blast podcast. And Andy Smith is way more than that and way cooler than that. And Andy, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you so much. I love that that first little intro. Whose vocals was that, I should say?
Nobody's.
What?
Nobody's.
Was that AI?
Welcome to the world of AI music. We have a whole new battle to fight now.
Holy crap. Did you so did it write all that too, or did you
No. You can use ChatGPT to write. I don't do that because I'm a writer and I don't think that AI can write. I think it can draw and I think it can sing, but musicians don't think it can sing, it can draw and write. No, I don't like the way it does June, moon, soon, tune kind of rhyme scheme. Like I once told us, like, can you give me an A-B rhyme scheme? And it literally wrote a verse and then put the letter A and then wrote a verse and put the letter B. I'm like, no, you have no idea what an A-B rhyme scheme is, apparently.
Yeah.
So I wrote all those lyrics and then I just went through a couple of iterations and trials until I like that one. We'll keep that one.
Oh, that's cool. And you can tell it like the genre you want it to be, or
you can tell it the genre. You can tell it when you want something spoken. You can tell it when you want what's a verse and what's a chorus, so it treats them differently. And it still has a mind of its own where it just does what it wants.
Right.
Sometimes you're like, yeah, okay, redo that, retry it. And you know, it's the genre is free form. You just type it in. Like, I want this one to be rock. I want it to be pop. I want this one to be like Britney Spears. Or you can just say, I want this to be piano and kazoo. And it tries to work with that. So it's a toy. It's fun.
That's cool though.
I don't think anything's going to make it to the top 40. The video we did for our book, the latest release, The Monsters Next Door, which is right here, available on Amazon right now. That was also AI music. So.
Oh, no way. Wow.
Yeah. So it's my new hobby. I'm making little songs for everybody now.
That's cool though. I haven't really messed around with AI stuff. I don't know. I don't have the time. I guess I just don't have a huge interest, the most digital I do is like I do digital drawing and stuff. I've got right in front of me down here. I've got my Cintiq, which is the 24 or 27 inch, size screen, diagonal measuring. And I'll draw some stuff on it, but generally when I do inking, I'll print it out in light blue onto Bristol and ink it by hand. But, for the past year, since I've been working on CordraF, with that book, I just want to get back to I guess you could say the basics or the nitty gritty, which is just how I used to work and how I worked for most of my career, which is taking out the script that I print out, doing a thumbnail right on the script paper next to the, block of text. And I just pull out the white, piece of Bristol board and I just start drawing. So
I have one comic book story to my credit in all the writing I've done and published. And I would rather write another 100,000 page novel than another 8-page comic story, because I'm like, it's hard. You've got to picture everything you're doing. And you've got to, like, oh, I can't say that here because, the page has to turn at some point.
Right.
And you've got, you've got to set up.
I guess when you're writing a novel, you can't really think about page turns because you're writing word count and however it's formatted is out of your hands. Right.
Exactly. I mean, you can have chapter 1 be 1,000 words and chapter 2 be 6,000. And then chapter 3 is another 500, whatever finishes the scene and makes a turn.
Right.
That's what you do. It's very free form, but
right.
you got to have that little mini cliffhanger at the end of every comic page to make the reader go to the next page. And
well, that, and you also want to make sure that if there's a big, a pretty big reveal or something like that, you want to have it on an even number page so there is a turn, and sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. It just, they're just, I'd like to say you can always make it work, especially when you're doing everything compared to when I worked for Marvel and DC and I would get a script from a writer, and, with ads, you never know because,
when you write it out and then it's like continued on third page following, you're like, wait, that wasn't part of the deal.
Right. But then, doing your own thing, which, I've done the two First Mans, I did a book before that, and now Kordrath. Even knowing it's your own thing, sometimes just how you're kind of pacing it out and stuff, it's like, well, that reveal is going to be on the right hand side, not an even number. That's okay. Yeah,
and then I always hear there's this zigzag rule of layout.
Yeah, but that's for the artist, not necessarily the writer. But yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because when you no. When it's kind of a Z, because when you're laying out a page as the artist, you want to lead the reader through in a Z shape because, we read left, right, and then back down to the next and then over. So, I mean, obviously it's more than just a Z unless it was just two tiers. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing that's one of the things I find is kind of lacking in modern stuff is, the way I was taught is not only the Z pattern, but when you're laying a panel out, you want to compose the objects in the panel to try and lead the eye to the next panel, whether it's next to it or below it, wherever. And, when I was growing up, reading comics in the 80s and stuff, and then, when I went back and got back issues from the 70s and so forth, artists were doing that. I mean, you could, I don't know if, somebody that's not well versed in comics would be able to point it out. Like if I showed it to my wife, I don't think she'd be able to go, oh yeah, I can see how this panel, the arrangement and the composition leads to this one, the next one, and so on and so forth. But the whole reason you do it is so subconsciously for the reader, it's an easier reading experience, right? I mean, that's the thing. You want nice, clear storytelling in the art while being dynamic, but you want it so it's a nice subconscious flow through the page. The letterer, which I think also goes in with the artist as well, because when I lay out a page, I take into account the word balloons and stuff.
Yeah, you got to make space for that.
Right. But you also want to make sure those have a nice flow through the page as well. If you're an artist like a Mignola or Alex Toth, somebody that uses a lot of black in their work, then you can also really take the whole page into account on how you design the black areas in each panel. So when you're looking at like the whole page small, if you just showed the page with just the major black areas, almost like an ink splot, that you see, like, what do you see here? It would form kind of a pleasing shape as well. Now, I've never been one to do that much lighting and like amount of heavy black in my work to get into that like part of it, but I'm really heavy into trying to design and compose every panel to help lead the eye around the page. Even on the last panel, even if it is an odd number page, I try and design that last panel so there's a angled up, going for the screen going up that way, even though I know it's an odd number page and you're turning it. It's just something I've been doing for so long that I just do it.
Yeah,
So
there's so many things to take into account when you're doing this, kids. If you're just drawing superheroes and think you're getting into comics, there's more than that. I mean, you can
yeah,
have a beautifully composed panel with just the right amount of black ink. It's laid out perfectly on the right page for the direction you're going, and then all of a sudden, the reader picks up and says, "Oh, look, character A is on the left, character B is on the right, but character B speaks first." So their word balloons end up crossing. I
yeah, and
hate that.
I've had many instances like that, and I'm really I don't want to say stickler because rules are made to be broken, but you shouldn't break them until you know them. But there's a thing called, and this is in film too, the 180-degree rule, where you want to treat every panel, and in movies it's the same, like you're an audience member watching a play on the stage. So if two people are talking, using us as an example, you're on the left, I'm on the right. It should always be that way. Now the camera can go all the way over here over my shoulder to you, right? So I'm framing you, but I'm still on the right, you're still on the left. And then the camera can go back the other way over your shoulder or behind like your ear, focusing on me. But once again, you're still on the left, I'm still on the right. The camera should never go all the way behind us because you break 180 degrees. And at that point, just switching to where you're on the right, I'm on the left can be jarring because we haven't moved. Now, and I've done this before, if like there's a medium shot of like the two of us talking, but then the next panel, I pull back for like a long shot and I show the character on the right walking towards like the character on the left, then you get the sense, okay, he's walking towards him, possibly to his other side. So then the next panel, I can flip it to where the guy that was on the right is now on the left and vice versa, because I showed visually the one person moving.
Right. And
I see
do that. Show it.
Yeah. And I see lots of, what's that?
We've seen too many recent examples where suddenly people are on the other side of the panel from where they were a minute ago, and you didn't see them move. They just did.
Right. And I'll be honest, I was just reading a comic. I'm not going to name it. And it's by an artist I really enjoy. I've always loved his work. I buy most of this, almost everything he does. And he is kind of notorious. He'll just be like, I don't care about the 180-degree rule. But once again, I don't know. It's doing what I do, and I'm sure as a writer, same for you. You can't turn it off. You know what I mean? I really wish there was like some way I could flick a switch in my brain that puts me in like the knowledge base of the average person that doesn't know the ins and outs of comics, because I'd like to know if reading that and somebody breaks like the 180-degree rule, if that affects that person or not. But there isn't something like that. And I know it affects me, but I think maybe it affects me just because I'm so entrenched in it. And I know, all this stuff, and I've been doing it for so long. You know what I mean? It's like the Z thing. I don't know if I gave my wife a comic to read where the artist didn't try at all to lead the eye around the page, and it was just like, I don't have to do that. We're taught to read left, right, down, left, right, down. If my wife would even look at it and be like, yeah, I read it fine. It didn't bother me. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I think it still would bother a reader. They just wouldn't know why.
Well, that's it. I kind of like to say it's like lettering. Good lettering, you really shouldn't notice, which is sad because there's so many good letterers out there and you want recognition, right?
Right.
But good lettering should just fade into the background. You're not supposed to pay attention to it. You're just supposed to read it and move on.
Unless you're Todd
Bad
Klein.
lettering, huh?
Unless you're Todd Klein,
right?
Doing Sandman, then oh look, it's changing font and everything here.
Well, yeah, of course, but that's still, that still falls into, the person will notice it, but they'll also notice it as in it's a different voice and blah, blah, blah. But, the basic gist is if it's bad lettering, anybody will notice it. See, that is something I could show to my wife, or I don't use my daughter as an example because she reads comics, but I think bad lettering you could show to most people and they'd be like, that's just bad. They might not tell you why, but it would slow down the reading experience because it's bad.
Yeah. I had issues when I picked up The Batman Who Laughs in trade paperback because I'm like, okay, I really want to read this. I want to find out what's going on in it. And I read like a third of it and I had to quit because my eyes were hurting because everything that The Batman Who Laughs said was in a black word balloon with thin red lettering. And I could not contrast it. I couldn't read it. But you've worked with letterers professionally, of course. So let me ask you this: what role do letterers have as a sort of line editor? I mean, I just saw a Batman book recently, and it was like they had a double word there in the word balloon. I was like, does the letterer just like copy paste these days, or does he literally have to say, well, they're saying the, but I've got to do it because that's what's on the script?
No, I'm guessing that it probably wasn't written that way in the script and the letterer made a mistake and the editor didn't catch it. That's my guess. The guy I work with, Steve Dutro, who I've worked with, if it's a job that I can, call the shots on, I always work with Steve. And part of it's because we went to the Kubert School together and, I've known him since, first year all the way through when we graduated. And plus I like his lettering. He will, like on Cordrath and stuff, when I would send him the script pages, because, we worked with it. I didn't just send him the whole book at once. I sent him batches of like 5 to 10 pages. And he would write back and go, let me know how it looks. I saw, an area where I think you needed a comma, so I put one in. And he would also say, there was this, I took it out. Just let me know if you want it back the way it was in the script. That's fine. I don't care. And I was like, no, man, I am by no means grammar guy whatsoever. I mean, honestly, English, when it came to like punctuation, basic punctuation, I'm fine. But getting into things like, oh no, we should have a semicolon here or this, forget it. I'm out. And, Dennis, who wrote Cordrath, he's definitely better at it than me. I mean, he used to teach and stuff. He, every now and then he would make a little mistake. And like, I'd say that out of the 70, 75, 76 pages of Cordrath, Steve maybe did that 5 or 6 times. But the biggest thing was we had Dennis's daughter do the proofreading. And the reason we did that is because she's an English teacher.
Oh,
So, and she's done proofreading and stuff before. So we were like, well, let's just, let's have her proofread it. And, when Dennis sent me the Word document with the notes, before I opened it, I was like, is this going to be painful when I look at it? And he goes, just look at it. And I did. I couldn't believe, like, there were very, very minor things. I mean, I was amazed, really not many notes at all. So that was good. Steve, we did a good job, or Steve did a good job. And, so that was nice. But, back to the question, that's a tough call when you're working for, like, I look at it like this. I've never lettered for, a company, but if I was working for, anyone, to be honest with you, and I didn't know them that well. So, if I'm just a hired gun letterer, it doesn't matter, Marvel, DC, Aaron, Graham, anybody, right? If I didn't know them that well, honestly, whatever they sent me in the script, unless it was blatantly obvious, like a double word thing, I would not question punctuation or anything. And
Well,
if it was a double word thing, I might send them a note saying, hey, I'm on page blah, blah, blah. I noticed this is how it was written. And I would cut and paste into the email how it was written. And I would say, did you mean to have two thes or whatever? And if they said, oh my God, no, thanks for finding, no, just one, I'd be like, okay. And I do it the right way. But really for Marvel and DC, there's no way in how I would change the script. I don't even care if there were two thes in it. I'd be like, nope, this is what the editor's job is.
okay.
And I think that's what's different between that and what we're doing is, I don't have a credit in any of my books that say editor, because it would be redundant, because basically it would say, on Core Draft, editor, Andy Smith, Dennis Turner. You know what I mean? I don't give credit for proofreading because it's proof, I've never seen a credit for proofreading before. And I think an editor does more than proofreading. So yeah, that's why I don't put an editor credit in the book, because it's what Dennis and I do for every page that comes in for, coloring, lettering, whatever. So yeah, I would, but for Marvel, DC, IDW, any company that has an editor on the book, I wouldn't change a damn thing. Even if there was a balloon that was literally written twice in the script, I'd be like, yeah, editor caught it. Now, if the editor came back and said, hey, can you knock out that double the to just one, or that, I'd go, oh sure. But it's not my fault. You approved the script.
Homophones where it's, one word and it means another word. They sound the same. You just say, nope, you've got past the editor. And so when I see that kind of thing and I'm like, oh, wow, the writer screwed up, I'm actually putting the blame in the right place, at least.
Yeah.
Blaming
but, I was just reading. So my local comic shop, they do Black Friday, and, back issue stuff is 50% off. So I picked up, it came out a few weeks ago. It was the Superman Returns 30th anniversary book. And, and I got the Death of Superman 30th anniversary. I'm a dork for stuff like that. I was in the business working when that all happened, and I bought the stuff. So for these two special books with their original creators back from back then, I was like, I'll buy them. But for the return, even though it was the same price, it's a thick book. It was $9.99. I was just like, it's just not as special to me as the death anniversary was from a few months ago. So I didn't pick it up. But for half off, I was like, oh, now I'll get it. So I bought it, and I'm reading it, and there's a word balloon. And have you ever done computer lettering or no?
Not computer lettering, no.
Okay. So when you form a balloon, I'll simplify it as best I can. When you do a balloon in an Illustrator for lettering, you do the oval shape, right? And then after you do the oval shape using a tool that can make an oval in any shape you want, squat, whatever, you basically use the pen tool to do the pointer that leads to the person talking. And usually when you do it, the pen tool, the black line of the pointer overlaps into the white of the oval. And then there's this other command that you do that syncs it all up and gets rid of that little bit of overlap from the tail. So you just have the nice balloon that has the nice tail, right? Well, in this one word balloon, the letterer forgot to get rid of the overlap of the tail going into the balloon. So it was riding over some of the actual dialogue. You could still read it, but my point to this is, okay, the letterer made a mistake. We all make mistakes. That's the editor's job. The editor didn't catch it.
And the editor's got to look at it at every different stage to see, what's changed since the last time they read it.
Right. And it's literally shit like that drives me crazy. Now, I know the editor's dealing with more than one book. I get it. But they have assistants, and put it this way, in 32 years of, well, let's not say 32 because books were being hand lettered when I started. Computer lettering, let's just go on 20 years. And in the past 23 years, because I know computer lettering, we'll say it started in 2000, but I know it was before that. In 23 years, I've never seen that before in a printed book. Now, I haven't seen every damn comic out there, but I've seen a shit ton. I've never seen that in a book. And I don't know if I want to chalk it up to they just missed it because it was just going through it too quick, or, you know, whoever the assistant editor was, and I didn't even look to see who the editor on the book was, just doesn't know any better.
I go back a long ways with fandom of comics, because I'm 56. I'm old, and I grew up.
Dude,
in Sparta,
I'm 50. I just turned 54. I'm right there with you.
All right. Well, I grew up in Sparta, Illinois, where all the DC comics were printed. So
Oh, okay, yeah.
Friends' dads were just bringing home print overruns, and that's how I just became inculcated into the entire industry. But you know, so I've seen indie comics where it's like the lettering was literally typewritten and then cut and paste to put into the balloon.
Oh yeah.
But back then it felt to me like the editors cared. The editors loved comics. They were being edited by people who used to write the comics, so they still loved the characters. And I say this all the time. It's like we're in an era where comics are being published by people who don't love comics.
Right.
And I know that's a blanket statement. It's not true for everybody, but at the most corporate level, I feel like it's just we're keeping this thing alive so that we can hold the trademark, so we can get the movies and the TV shows and the T-shirts and the lunch boxes and all the stuff that actually makes us money.
No, I agree. I agree with that because, you know, as weird as it seems, you know, I remember when I was going to the Kubert School in Jersey, my aunt and uncle lived about a half hour, 40 minutes away. So I'd go over there every so often. And I remember in my first year, they would, you know, one of them asked me, my aunt or my uncle asked me, you know, where do you see yourself? Like, is it just drawing comics or, you know, what? And I said, I had two different answers. One was, you know, drawing comics is a lot like directing in a way because you're telling a story visually from a written script. So who knows if maybe after doing this, if I ever had the opportunity to try and direct something live action, that'd be cool. And another answer was, I don't know, maybe in 30 or, because remember, I'm like 18, 19. I said maybe 30, you know, 35 years after doing it, if, you know, I didn't want to draw full time, and there was like an editor job open, I could see possibly doing that because I do like all the behind the scenes stuff as well in comics. And I think part of that's because in the Kubert School, we were taught to be well-rounded from the standpoint of learning how to letter, learning how to color, basically learning how to do every aspect of it for two reasons. One, because Joe really wanted to have that high percentage rate of people getting a job when they graduated. And it didn't matter if it was, well, as long as it was an art job, it didn't matter if it was comics or doing paste up in mechanicals or whatever. But if it was comics, Joe Kubert's attitude was, you know, if you have to start off lettering, then you start off lettering and work your way up. I mean, that's how Andy and Adam Kubert started, was lettering. So point is, I thought, yeah, I could see, you know, 35 years down the road, if an editor thing opened up, you know, taking that on and doing that. And, you know, I think in the 50s, 60s, 70s more and 80s and somewhat into the 90s, the people editing books used to be freelancers, you know, used to be artists and writers and stuff. And they did love comics. And because they did that, you know, as a freelancer, they could see that side of it when dealing with freelancers, and they had the knowledge to actually edit books. Whereas, like you said, it would be a blanket statement to say every editor back then moved up that way, just like it's a blanket statement now to say every editor now doesn't love comics. But I'm willing to bet while the higher percentage back then did work their way up through, right? So you only had a few that maybe were like, it's a job. It's reversed. I'm willing to bet it's a few love comics in the job, and the rest are like, yeah, it's a gig. I graduated school, had to get a gig or something. Or they'll say they love comics, but then if you really try and test them on it, they don't know shit.
Yeah, we've seen plenty of that.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the Kubert School a couple of different times now, and the fact that they teach a well-rounded curriculum on the business. Do they teach the whole business aspect of it, or is it just the business of art? I mean, like, do they get into things like, hey, you should probably know some basic inventory accounting. You should know how some distribution works.
So when I went, and I always paraphrase, and I think this is probably anybody that went to any school, is I can only speak on when I went there, obviously. And in my third year, we had a class on, I don't think it was called business and finance. It might have just been called like business of illustration, or the whole deal with the class was business of being a freelance artist, right? So it dealt with basic contracts. It dealt with, taxes. And we're not talking taxes to the point of you're a CPA. We're talking literally, it was probably stated, well, it wasn't probably, because this is still something that stuck with me, is you're a freelancer. You don't get taxes taken out. So when you get your check, don't be like, woohoo, I can spend it all, because you have to pay taxes every year. You need to pay quarterly taxes, just like it sounds. It's every quarter, which is still a little deceiving, because if it was every quarter, your first payment would be March, but your first payment's actually April 15th when taxes are due, and your next one is 2 months later.
Oh,
that's why your first payment should actually be March.
Yeah.
But that's not how it works. So it actually goes April 15th to June, September, and then December. So it's a little weird, but it is what it is. So anyhow, they'd say you have to pay quarterly taxes. The best rule of thumb is whatever your paycheck is, take 30% of it and put it away. And that's high, obviously. But the nice thing about it is if you do that, you'll have enough to pay your quarterlies, your estimated quarterlies. You'll probably end up overpaying, so you'll get a refund, and you'll still probably have money left over, because nobody, I've never paid 30% in taxes. And then they would go into
used to living on the 2/3. So
right.
You learn.
And then they would also touch on write-offs, things you can write off, because obviously, if you're building houses and you're a freelance contractor, he can write off stuff that I can't. I can't go to Home Depot. Well, I shouldn't say that. I was going to say I can't go to Home Depot, buy 2x4s and write them off. However, if it's for construction inside my studio, I can. So I take that back.
You're going to build.
But the point is, what's right? Well, the point is they would go into various things that you can write off on your taxes and stuff. And it was 9 months, 1 day a week. I'm sure deep down I remember most of it, and it just, whenever I do stuff, I'm like, oh yeah. But did they go into distribution and stuff? No, not really. Joe might have talked about, Joe didn't teach that class. I want to say I had Mike Chen as the teacher of that class, but every teacher would always touch on other aspects of stuff regardless. I'm sure Joe talked about self-publishing because he was probably the most prolific one that did self-publishing, at least while I went to the school, besides working for DC mostly and Marvel for a little bit. So Joe probably touched on self-publishing, but I think it all comes down to the golden rule, which is being diligent, paying attention to deadlines, and, just being responsible.
Yeah.
And I think while that doesn't help learn anything about distribution, just keeping those three things top of mind will just help throughout. You know what I mean?
I'm wondering now if, given how much things have changed since you graduated, if they're, now teaching classes on, so you want to crowdfund your comic, here's the things you got to know. And
I think they might. So since the school was sold, because it was sold a few years ago to Anthony, is it Marquez? I'm probably mispronouncing his last name. But he went there as well. So since he took over, he has started things like actual virtual classes that you can take, so you don't have to move to New Jersey and stuff. Now, they're not, as far as I know, it's not like you can take the whole 3 years that way. It's more along the lines of going, oh, I want to take this class on storytelling, and it's 8 weeks, and you have a virtual session, Zoom session with the instructor. You get your assignment, turn it in, they go over it, blah, blah, blah. There might be, I don't know if there's a specific class for crowdfunding, but because I see a lot of the stuff on Facebook for the different things, and I belong to their newsletter, so I'll get, once or twice a month a newsletter from the Kubert School with like the new stuff that's going on and whatnot. If there's not a class, I want to say that I at least saw something for like, maybe a live seminar or something. And if not, they should definitely do it.
Yeah,
I think they should definitely do it.
All right, so we've talked about a lot of educational things about making comics, boys and girls. And Harrenberg, thank you so much for throwing the link out there in the chat. It gives me the opportunity to remind people that the link is also right below the video. Just click on that. Opens in a whole new window. You won't miss any of this while you're getting your wallet out and putting it down on nice and tight. So let's take a look at what is nice and tight. Now, I've heard the phrase before, when looking at somebody's pencils, and it all comes down to like, fine lines real close together. Somebody once mentioned that somebody's pencils were so tight they were hemorrhoidal. I can't remember who it was, but that stuck with me for like 40 years now. Because I was a comic book fan for a long time. But yeah, folks, if you want to, do what everyone else does who learns how to draw comics and copy from really good stuff, here's the pencil work. So this is where I'm jealous of artists as a writer, Andy. And that's that, artists don't throw away anything they've ever done. If they're sitting there at lunch and they're sketching on something, like, that's not going to go anywhere. Put that in the drawer, because someday I may do a sketchbook and it will sell. And here we are. I'm guessing. I don't know that you actually sat down and said, you know what, I'm going to do nice and tight, and I'm going to make this picture first and then draw it, and then this picture first and then draw it.
Oh, no. This was, the whole beginnings behind this book was I knew that there was going to be from fulfillment to the beginning of the next core draft campaign, probably a 3-month gap or so. And, with fulfillment, hopefully starting next week, because I believe I got a shipment notification, so I should be getting the books next week. So fulfillment should begin next week. Of that, the next campaign still won't launch until spring, probably, because I gotta start drawing it to get preview pages done and such. And I've done a few things, but it's not interior stuff yet. So I wanted to have something out there, kind of like a bridge campaign, I guess you could call it. And, I've done sketchbooks that back when people first started doing them, where they were basically 8.5 by 11 pieces of paper, printed, but folded and stapled. That's how Adam Hughes's first sketchbook started. I've done those. I've done an 8.5 by 11 square bound sketchbook. I did that like almost 20 years ago. And, it's just like they say, they're either preliminary sketches or they're commissions or, whatever. And I wanted to do something different. And I thought, well, besides my website that has, some examples under the Marvel and DC tabs of, full penciled stuff, because that's mostly what I did for those guys. I didn't do a lot of my own inking for those guys. I thought I've got just like, since I started scanning stuff about 20 years ago, I'm like, I've got scans of like all my pencils from every job I've done since then. And then I've got photocopies of every job before that, And I thought doing a sketchbook that just focused on some of my favorite pages. So not like a full book. The book, right? This is 52 pages. Once we hit 5,000, it'll be 60 pages. So I'm not going to sit there and go, I like this whole 20-page book and print all that, because every book has just boring talking head stuff, So my goal with this was to just go back over some of my favorite jobs and pick out not all splash pages, of course. I mean, on the cover, of course, I'm going to show that. But, penciled pages with, paneled pages, I should say, that I just think are cool, hero shots, whatever. But, print the whole page, not just like, ooh, this panel's really cool. So it's, 52 pages of full, it's 911 by 17. The book is bigger than a comic. It's like 8.3 by 11.7 is the print size. So it's larger. And, print them, since I have scans and I scan everything in at 300 to 400 DPI that are nice and high res. I just thought it'd be a different type of art book that I haven't seen, because I also collect sketchbooks from artists, whether they're friends of mine or just artists I like, as I'm walking through a con and I'm like, oh, this is cool. And every one is, like I said, sketches or commissions. I've never seen something like this. And I just thought the only people that have really seen this stuff are the editors and then the people that ink the pages. And that's it. Other than that, it's not like I take these pages and shoot them all over the place. Like I said, I put a few up on my website just so people can see examples, but I don't have a ton, because it's just that rule of thumb of you don't need to throw up like 30 pages of something on your website of like pencil work. 5 or 6 will do the job. And I'm sure I probably have a little more than that, but I don't have 30. So
where, most sketchbooks, where most sketchbooks would be like a place where, fledgling artists could go to learn anatomy. And speaking of anatomy, I now know that Nice and Tight obviously came from Red Sonja's abs here.
That's right.
But you're putting up more of a lesson in page layout then, because
that's a good way to look at it too. I'm hesitant to use the word like lesson and stuff like that, because I don't want to give the impression that there's any teaching in this at all, because there's not. It's every page is just basically like you see there. It'll be the pencil page. There's not going to be I don't want to go on record and say there's not going to be like annotations like what the page and book is that it's from. I actually think I might do that, even though it says at the top of every one. I can't guarantee every scan has that. So for consistency, I might actually, and I think I will now that I'm actually hearing it, I'll probably, put at the bottom, this is page number, 6 from, issue blah, 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 number, whatever. So if somebody likes it, they could try and find the whole book. But other than that, there's no, there's not going to be like, I did this because of this and whatever. But if you want to see and try and deconstruct for yourself how I tried to lead the eye around the page and stuff like that, yeah, I think it's a great resource. I think it's a great resource just to see different pencil techniques, because when I was getting into the business, or I should say when I was a fan before I went to like the Kubert school, and I was, I wanted to draw comics. Well, all I had to look at back then, now granted there's the internet now, so it's a lot easier, but we're talking mid 80s. There was no internet, so I didn't see pencil pages. All I could see was the printed comic that I would collect and buy from the shop. Right. So I was under the impression, I guess you could say, that what I saw in the comic book is basically what the penciler turned in. And then the inker didn't just trace it, because I knew enough that the inker had to add line weight and such to the art. But if I saw a specific type of rendering or feathering line printed in the book, I assume that's how the penciler drew it. And that's part of why my penciling style isn't like really loose. I also don't consider it, I consider it tight for sure, but I've also seen pencilers that make my stuff look loose because it is so tight to, they really just want the inker to add line weight and trace it. Yeah. Whereas my work, when you ink it, you definitely have to know what you're doing, because there are areas where there's feathering, but you can still, a guy like Norm Ratman, who's a great inker, and then a guy like Mark Farmer, who's a great inker, and I've worked with them both. And then, Art Taber, who I've worked with too, you could give them the same thing and get 3 different versions of it, but still know I drew it.
Yeah, the classic example of that is the 1976 Captain America Bicentennial Treasury Edition. Jack Kirby drew every page, but every single page was inked by somebody else, and the art style just changes and flickers in front of you as you turn the pages. Because of the
and Kirby stuff was pretty tight back then, but it was still open for some interpretation. I don't like it when an inker will look at a drawing and go, "Oh, I think the shoulder outline should be different because this is how I do it," and they change it. And I've talked to somebody, I've worked with a couple inkers that did stuff like that, because they were also, they were more inkers than they were pencilers, but they did draw. And I can remember telling them, going, "Look, I understand where you're coming from, but you didn't draw it. I did. Ink it. Don't change outlines and stuff. That might be how you do it if you were drawing it, and that's fine, but you're not. I am." Because I've been on the flip side. I haven't inked a ton of different artists. I've inked, the person I've inked the most is Bart Sears. But I've inked Eric Larson. I've inked John Byrne. I've inked Daryl Banks. I did a run on Green Lantern inking over Daryl Banks. I inked Keith Giffen. I'm trying to think of other guys I've worked over. I inked Aaron Lopresti, just I think on a couple pages when we were at CrossGen. I inked Jimmy Chung. I inked on 1 page at CrossGen because the book had to get out, so we all pitched in. I draw differently from every one of those guys, but not once when I was inking their work did I go, "Well, that's not how I draw that. Change it." You know what I mean? Now, if you're doing breakdowns, if you're a finisher and you're inking somebody's breakdowns, well, that's a whole different story. And, once again, I love talking this stuff because I get ideas. Maybe, we hit 5,000, I'm adding 8 pages. Maybe the next stretch goal, so I can basically say all the stretch goals will just be adding pages to the book, because I think the value in an art book compared to a graphic novel isn't doing stretch goals like, "Oh, here's a bookmark" and stuff like that. I think that's great for graphic novels, but for an art book, I think the best stretch goals you can give people is just adding more art to the book, because they're not paying anything more for it. So every stretch goal is going to be more art. So maybe after the $5,000 stretch goal, the next stretch goal where I add pages, maybe I will just add some of the breakdowns I've done so people can see the difference. But breakdowns are pretty much the way I do them, just outline drawings. So almost like a coloring book. So everything's there, all the costume detail, all the backgrounds, everything's there, but there's no lighting. It's literally just, it's like a coloring book, right?
Okay.
And the finisher's job at that point is to add, texture, lighting, rendering. And because it's over the artist breakdowns, that is where I believe if the finisher wants to go, yeah, I don't draw shoulders like that and change an outline, they can, because it really is more of a 50-50 arrangement between the penciler or breakdown artist and the finisher. And it even goes that way when they do art returns. When they do art returns for breakdowns and finishers, it's a 50-50 split. When they do art returns for somebody that does full pencils and the inker, it's 70-30. So I get 70%. So, if comics were 21 pages, it's easy math. I get 14 and the inker gets 7.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
and I've inked people's breakdowns before. I inked 4 issues, or I should say I did finishes over 4 issues of Dan Jurgens on the last 4 issues of Legion of Superheroes about 15 years ago. And it was Dan's breakdowns. And the editor told me, he goes, you can do whatever you want. He goes, these are Dan's breakdowns. So, I mean, honestly, if you look at that book, I really did steamroll over top of Dan to the extent of all the poses that Dan drew are the same, but I was redrawing a lot of stuff because I don't think and draw like Dan, and they were breakdowns. So I'm like, yeah, I'll do whatever I want. Now,
I've got a friend,
Dan,
Rich Parada,
yeah.
who did inks for Marvel, and I want to say I may be totally misquoting him. So, Rich, don't kill me if I got this wrong. But it seemed like there was a department at Marvel that was correction inkers, and they didn't get really credit on the book, but it was like pages were brought into them, said fix this thing, and they would actually have to redraw something because the editor said this is wrong, go over it.
Oh yeah, there was. So I don't know anymore. And I know who you're talking about. I've never met Rich, but I know the name. I don't know about anymore, but in the 80s is when John Romita, the art director at Marvel for the long time, started up what they called Romita's Raiders. And that's where, if you picture a square, right? This is old 387 Park Avenue South, Marvel Comics office. So if you picture a square, and on the outside of the square are all the editors' offices and management type stuff. Inside the middle was the bullpen with, I'm trying to remember, I don't know, let's say 5 or 6 drafting tables. And that's where people were hired full time as Romita's Raiders. There's an artist named Sergio Cariello, good friend of mine. He was a Romita's Raider before he broke in, doing as a penciler and working for DC and Marvel and so on and so forth. And that's where a lot of guys did. Another good friend of mine, Brad Venkata, was a Romita Raider before he branched off into coloring and then inking and whatnot. And they would, but that was more for stuff like, oh, he forgot to draw, this costume detail, fix it. And they were supposed to put this white correction tape over top the art and fix it that way. They were never supposed to, and I know they have just from personal experience, but they were never supposed to go right in on their original art with whiteout and ink. Because if the artist got it back, he might be like, yeah, I get it, I screwed up, but I'd rather see my art the way it was. Let me peel that off. And I did that a few times because I did an issue of Spider-Man. I screwed up a couple things. I don't remember what, but when I got the original art back, I was like, I didn't think that looked right when I saw the printed book, and I'd peel it off. But then I did some work on an issue of Cable to help out. This was in the 90s, mid-late 90s, and Stephen Platt was the regular artist on it. and his style and mine are way different at that time. His was a, you know, a ton of line work, ton of rendering, and at that time mine wasn't. And I guess after they saw the 4 pages, even though I sent them up, you know, beforehand so they could approve them, because I was inking the work as well because the deadline was so tight, they could have just called me and said, hey, this is a little too much of a departure from Platt. Could you go in and add some more line work? And I would have been like, yeah, okay, whatever. I wouldn't have liked it, but I would have done it. Well, they sent it to their production department, you know, the Raiders, if that's what they were still called then. This was, you know, like I said, 96, 97. And the artist in the bullpen did add a lot of line work to it, all on their original art. So going back to something you mentioned earlier about we keep a lot of stuff, don't throw stuff away. I'll be honest, when I got those 4 pages back, because I only did 4, I did 5 pages. They didn't use one of them. So that one was never touched, but they used 4. Because I guess Platt actually, the one they didn't use was the last page of the book, and it was a splash page. And because it was a splash page, I'm assuming Stephen Platt was like, oh no, I want to do that one because it's a splash page. Right. So they didn't use that one, but they used my other 4. And like I said, the guy went in production and literally did all the additional inking on my original, not with overlays or anything. So I'll be honest, when I got those 4 pages back from Marvel, I tore them all up and threw them away.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I do regret that. It wasn't
yours anymore, was it? It was defaced.
It was. And I still, you know, when somebody comes up to me at a convention and has me sign that book, I sign it. I actually tell them the story as well. I mean, it's been 25, 24 years, something like that. So, you know, I kind of look back on it. I'm like, I probably shouldn't have thrown them away, but what's done is done. I still have my photocopies of what I turned in. So good enough.
You could have sold them, you know, and just gotten rid of them.
No, see, that's the thing. I don't sell my art. I would never have sold. No, I sold my art for like the first 3 years I was in the business. And then around 94, 95, I stopped. So unless I worked with an inker who sells their stuff, I have all my stuff. So except for those first 3 or 4 years. So I would never have sold those because I wouldn't put something like that out there for sale.
I'm looking at these pages you got in the book here, and you go from several panels to, you know, this beautiful Wonder Woman splash page here, and it brings to mind something that I did a couple of years ago, Andy. It's I wanted to see what we were getting for our money, and the only way I could test this was with Justice League of America because I've got decades of it in my collection. So I took a 12-issue run. From the 60s and from the 70s and from the 80s and from the 90s and from the 2000s, because that's when it was that I was doing this. And I counted the number of pages in each issue that had art on them. I counted the number of stories in the entire arc run. So, you know, from the 60s, you would sometimes get 2 stories in a book. And in the 2000s, it would take 6 or 7 issues to tell one story. And that was the way I counted it, not by chapters. I counted the words and the panels and each one. And then I adjusted all the cover prices for inflation. So we were on an even keel, and scientifically proved we were getting less story and fewer panels and fewer words for higher dollar. So being in the industry, was there an edict that came down that said, hey, draw bigger panels with fewer words? Or was it just an evolution that just happened?
Well, part of it was, you know, definitely the impact of, you know, this goes late 80s, early 90s at Marvel with Todd and Jim, you know, all the Image founders. And I never really put 2 and 2 to put this together until I listened to Rob Liefeld's podcast. I find it really fascinating. I love his energy. He's actually pumped me up to go buy back issues of stuff that I used to have and I got rid of, or stuff I never had. He's very knowledgeable, but I never really put two and two together with what I'm about to say is, and if you look at X-Men at its heyday with Jim Lee and whatever Silvestri was working on at that time, and then, Rob was probably New Mutants and X-Force, and, Will's Portacio on the other X book, and, Todd on Spider-Man. Todd mentioned just in a podcast from a few months ago about them being influenced. And I can't speak for all of them. I can only speak for Rob because this is what he said, but being influenced by manga. And I was like, I never really thought of that. And I like manga. I don't have a ton, but I have some. And I went back and looked at it. I'm like, I can see that now because it works. I think it worked back then because it was just so exciting and new. These big splashy images, really exciting. It was like sugar. You just got like, I've always liked Rob stuff. I've always liked Jim Lee stuff. Sylvester, I always liked all those guys. But at the same time, I like guys like Jim Aparo, Neil Adams, Alan Davis, Steve Root. So I'm really like on opposite ends with these guys. But I can appreciate all of it for what it is. And for those guys, like I said, it really is that sugar high. You're reading these comics. They're just coming right at you in the face with the action and stuff. And it's eye candy. And I went and I'm looking through some of the manga I have, and it's right there. The big panels. I mean, the speed lines, but also, and this is more modern now. So I don't know how they merged, but definitely you don't have these long soliloquies of dialogue in the panels. Now, I do know from, talking to people and stuff when it comes to the writing of it, I want to say it was Bendis when he came in at Marvel that really did introduce like that decompressed storytelling where you will have a page of like, and Bendis is just known for it, where it's like 3 panels of the dude's face and something in each panel changes slightly in his emotion and stuff. And they might be silent or something. And you're just like, okay. And that's fine every now and then. But if you do it too much, then it's just done too much. I mean, you can find panels like that, I'm sure, back in the day, but it's because it was done in moderation. But I definitely totally understand what you're saying. One of my favorite artists growing up was, and still is, John Byrne. And I bought everything he did, the X-Men, Alpha Flight, Fantastic Four, Namor, She-Hulk, and I think John was such a great comic book artist because even though this is way before the 90s with Jim Lee and Rob and those guys, he was a guy that I would always look at and go, okay, he balances the panels, the amount of panels going from page to page nicely. So it's not always, say, like a Jack Kirby where it was like 6, 6, 6, 6, or 9-panel grid or 4-panel grid. And Jack did that for expedience because trust me, if going in, you're just going to do a 6-panel grid on a page, that takes out so much thinking because you're not thinking about what panels should be bigger for impact and smaller here and whatnot, because you're just going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? But Byrne would do that every now and then, but a lot of times he changed the shape of the panels. But he would go from like a 3-panel page to a 5-panel page to a 4-panel page to a 6. And I think subconsciously as a kid that influenced me because it keeps it gives you a nice variety. So you're not reading through a book going, it's a 6-panel grid. It's another 6-panel page. Even if it's not a grid, it's 6 panels. It's 6 panels. There's no, if you're doing something like that, to me, I almost call it like a flat line in a way, Yeah. But when you're varying the panels, from page to page, you're giving kind of a nice up and down. You're trying to give a nice rhythm to the story is what I think.
Yeah.
and what I try to do. And, there was the other thing that Byrne did that I love too, is he would basically establish a scene, i.e. where the characters are at. So if they're in a lab, he would draw the characters, he would draw the lab, and then he might draw it again. Or I've seen instances where he's like, he established it, he drew the couple pages in that lab, maybe showed pieces of it, but not full blown backgrounds. And then once the scene changed, he would boom, put the work in, establish it all over again, wherever the new scene was. And then once again, just drop them here and there because, some people might look at it and be like, oh, he's not drawing backgrounds, that's lazy. But technically it's not, because as the artist, it's also your job to control the pacing and how fast you want the person to read through the story.
Right.
So if I want you to really click through a fight scene, right? Because fight scenes are supposed to be kinetic and just quick. I might establish the background where the fight takes place, but then if in the next 4 or 5 panels, if they're not, if the characters aren't interacting with the background in any way, I might never draw a background again because I want you to read it fast.
Yeah.
If I want to slow you down, what's that?
That was what inspired me to do that counting thing, was that I noticed that I've never been a slouch at reading. I was always advanced reader in grade school because of comic books.
Sure.
That's what I learned to read off of. But it used to take me 15, 20 minutes to read a comic book. And I was, coming home from the comic shop and sitting down and go through the latest Batman in 5 minutes. I'm like, what the hell happened?
Right. And, and it all depends on what the book is. Cause that's the other thing too, is now, my career has mostly been with superheroes. I did do the Red Sonja Claw stuff about a decade ago. And now obviously I'm drawing Kordrath. But the one thing that the through line for all that stuff is they're all action adventure. So while Kordrath isn't a guy in tights and stuff in the modern world, it's still action adventure. So I can apply the same rules, right? When drawing a superhero book, when it comes to like pacing and stuff. But if you were to give me, if I was to draw a real life, I'm looking at I have a bookshelf. So all behind me is like Marvel, DC, then art books and stuff. But in front of me, what you can't see is independent stuff, which isn't all superhero. So, okay. So Sin City, right?
Sure.
A murder mystery type story. Well, I would probably approach that a little differently because it's not a superhero story. Now I've never drawn anything like that in my career. And well, actually, once again, I have to take that back. I did 2 chapters of a story called Cuda for Heavy Metal, which actually was a real world cop type thing. So, but I approached it differently because it's not superheroes in tights and stuff. I still did the storytelling I do, which is, once again, I love Jack Kirby. I really do. I love the guy's work. I love his designs, his imagination. And I do like his storytelling of the 6-panel grids and 4-panel grids because I think it works for him. But on the other end, his contemporary, Joe Kubert, I like Joe's storytelling more because even back in the golden age, when Joe was drawing in the 50s and 60s, whatnot, Joe always, and I'm not saying Joe never did a 6-panel grid, but Joe was more about when you design your page, have an impact panel, and that doesn't mean it has to be a fight or action. It could be a close-up of somebody. But the whole point is when you're reading through a page that has 5 panels on it or 6, try and pick out what you think and believe is the most impactful panel of that page. Make that the largest and build around it, and that's the type of storytelling that I like to do. So
I have not been telling people about your book, Andy, because we've been talking so much
No,
about.
no, it's all good. I love talking
business.
about this stuff. So
I love hearing about it because I've loved the industry for so long, and to find out more about what goes into it, especially from people who actually care about it. It's I could go on all night. I'm the guy who would hang at your table at the con and just keep talking to you while you're trying to sign stuff for other people.
yeah, and I was that and honestly, I've done that to artists that I enjoy. So and love. So I love the process.
I miss conventions, Andy, because I started going to conventions when I was old enough to go out on my own. So I was like in college. It was late 80s. It was like Chicago Comic-Con. And I've got, first of all, comic book companies went to them. There were celebrities at the Comic-Con. Yeah, the celebrity was Julie Schwartz. That's the guy you went to see because for a big celebrity. I've got my greatest Batman and Joker stories ever told, those hardcovers, and those things, they're being buried with me because they already read like a funeral book. If you open it up, it's Dick Giordano, Denny O'Neil, Jim Aparo, Dick Sprang, Sheldon Moldoff, all of them signed the inside of that book.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so many of them are gone now. Steve Englehart, hold on, man. 'Cause you're the last one remaining, I think. Bob Rozakis signed it too.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, I love going to cons, but now that we've got internet stuff like this, you can get artwork commissions through things like this, and you're doing some commissions on these things. I scrolled quickly through this while we were talking. Not many tiers, which is a good thing for me. I like keeping it simple.
Yeah, I couldn't. It's an art book. I couldn't. It's really, I guess, what I call just a down and dirty basic campaign to bridge between the core drafts. I would be lying if I said I didn't want this campaign to go through the roof. But I'm also a realist. I'm also a realist and go, it's an art book. I have my expectations, and I'll be honest, they're met. I still want it to go out and get higher and stuff so I can add the pages for the people. But, I go into things with realistic expectations, and you can't look at every project being the same. So, but I'm proud of this.
Physical and digital. So.
Yep. I want to do that because, well, that is actually, where is it? Let's see. Oh. This is the make ready from years ago, so it's not stapled at all. But so this actually came out a decade ago.
Okay.
And it's 64 pages. It's 6x9, so it's a little bit smaller than a comic. It is square bound. And out of all the sketchbooks I've done, because I think I've done 5 or 6, this is one of my favorite ones. So I wanted to put it back out, because I try to hold back 3 or 4 of everything for myself. So then, if there is somebody I really want to be like, here, take this. So I do. I have 3 or 4, but that's it. So I want to put it back out. This is the back cover to it. So basically, front cover is the Marvel guys. And this was actually done for a poster, a big banner for a convention I went to. So it was pretty cool seeing that hung from the ceiling. And then that I just did for fun, the new 52 iterations. The inside of the book's all black and white, but I want to put it back out because it's one of my favorite ones. It's 64 pages. However, I'm adding an additional 20 pages to it to make it 84 of current stuff.
So it's a new book, really, then?
It is. So even if somebody goes, I already have that, nah, you don't, because I'm adding 20 pages of new stuff. So, that's why that's part of it.
Head sketch.
What's that?
The one I'm looking at is this head sketch, because I have a collection of original art, and it's always the same character. It's an accident. Again, going to conventions, and first of all, I was just going to collect autographs, and I'm like, wait, they're actually drawing stuff here, and you can pay them, and you can take it home, and I forget who my first 2 were, but immediately upon meeting them, the first thing I knew I wanted them to draw was not what they were known for drawing. Because I always want to see you draw something else. And I asked the first guys, like, can you draw Barbara Gordon Batgirl? Because I'd always liked that character since I was like puberty, because of the TV show. And they said, oh,
Sure.
well, yeah, I never draw her before. You got a reference. And then I asked the second guy to do the same thing because I'm like, oh, I'll just compare the two. Look, they're different styles. And suddenly it was a body of work. So now it's like everyone I run into, I'm like, yep, this is what you got to draw. Here's the character. So I'm looking at doing that and saying, hey, I'll get Andy to draw a head sketch of the Barbara Gordon Batgirl. And I'll just
Yeah, I do that.
put it up here with Ryan Wins is right over there. I'll probably just hang it up right next to it.
Yeah, no, I do that. And those are all 7x10, so they fit nicely into a comic bag when I mail them out. I mean, they get mailed with the book, but I put them in a bag and board, just so they don't get messed up.
I love it when all the stuff fits in the Gemini. I panic
So do
when
I.
packing means, I got to get special boxes and special material.
Yep. And somebody asked if this, the book itself would fit in a Gemini, and I was like, oh yeah, those things. That's what I like about them, because they have the different folds for the different size of the stuff.
Yeah, and here's the thing about a Gemini: they're cardboard. Those 3 little folds on each side, those are suggestions. You can make new ones. and
Oh
I
yeah.
have.
Oh yeah. So have I. Yeah, they're just suggestions. Oh yeah. So
It's more of a guideline.
exactly.
Now you got some interesting tiers here at the very end of this, which you got the a video portfolio review, and nobody's taking.
Yeah,
I
might. I haven't. I might take a clip from that video because the guy. I've done a couple of them, and the few I've done, they've all said, yeah, if you want to clip it as an example, feel free. And I might do that to add to the page, just so people can see it. But I thought just showing the image like I did would be good. But basically, it's kind of like we're doing now, except it's not live to the world. It's just you and I recording, and I go through. I mean, it can be anything. If you're for these guys, one of the guys had 5 pencil pages, and I went through every page, and in Photoshop, screen shared just like that image shows, and drew over top and explained why and whatnot. And then the example here is from an actual published book from, I believe it was, I'm blanking on the name of the book, but it was from Genuine Comics, Dave Brink. And Eric Hodson was the artist, and I backed the book and I read it and I thought it looked good. And I said that, and Eric asked me something on Twitter, and I DM'd him and said, if you want, I can go over it, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, oh yeah, that'd be great. And I said, okay, this is, what the deal is. Yeah, okay, that'd be great. So we spent the 2 hours, and he sent me a PDF of the book, and I exported all the pages as JPEG so I could open them in Photoshop. And I went through all 24 pages. And, some pages I was like, this is cool. Next. And in some pages, and this was, the last page, I thought it could have been composed better and such. There wasn't a lot. And everybody, obviously every artist's skill level is different. Eric's work, there wasn't a lot of like drawing stuff from the standpoint of, oh, this should be, this is drawn wrong. It should be like this. It was more just composition and stuff like that. Whereas the other artists I worked over, there was some drawing things, basic drawing stuff that I corrected. Because I also, about 13 years ago, I was a teacher at the University of North Carolina, Charlotte, for a few semesters. So I don't know. I thought it'd be kind of cool to offer to people. So if anybody wants it, and then you get the whole video when it's done, so you can replay it at your leisure, and you get all the layered files of the draw over stuff. So you can click the layer off and on in Photoshop to see, and refer back to and whatnot. So
have you ever had to review somebody's portfolio and you knew immediately by looking at it, oh, this, how do I review this without this guy running out and killing himself, because it was just so bad.
It wasn't a portfolio review, but when I was teaching at the University of North Carolina, Charlotte over here, I was teaching a storytelling class. So on the first day, I taught the first day's class, college, it's always like a 2.5 hour class. The first hour or so, I would spend just introducing the class to who I am and my work and stuff, so they knew who their teacher was. And then after that, I would kind of look at people's work one-on-one so I could get a feeling of where they're at. But I also prefaced every class that first day saying, this is a storytelling class. It's not a drawing class. Now, that doesn't mean I'm going to look at your work and never be like, oh, you could do this better and here's how. Of course, I'm going to do that. But what it means is my priority as a teacher is to teach you storytelling, not teach you how to draw.
Right.
Because to get into the class, you had to have a few prerequisites already passed at the school, and basic drawing was one of them. Well, I was amazed by the lack of basic drawing skills by some of the students. Not all of them, but some of them. And this one just was, he just, it's college, they don't care. They just, hey, it's check cleared, next. So, yes. Honestly, this one student, his work just wasn't there. He would not have made it through the semester, because you have to have a certain amount of basic drawing skills for storytelling, and I'm not saying, there was barely anybody in the classes I taught that drew, you could say, stylized realism, which is how I describe what I do, because it's not photorealistic, but it's not super cartoony.
Sure.
It's stylized realism. I had people drawing cartoony stuff and some people trying to do more realistic stuff, and that's fine. But this guy he just was not there. And I took him out into the hall on that first class, and I just said, look, I know that you have a certain amount of time into the semester where you can switch classes or just dump it all together and get a refund for whatever the tuition for this class was. Huh?
You're giving him a head start.
I did. I said, in my honest opinion, I would go and take a different class because this is not going to serve you well. Yeah. And he did. I don't know what he took, and he didn't come back to mine. So,
okay. The reason I asked that is because every time I think about artists giving, portfolio reviews, I'm always reminded of a friend of mine who was doing an indie comic when I lived in St. Louis. And this is, again, back in the very early 90s. And he decided that, he was going to get his portfolio reviewed by Neil Adams.
Oof.
Yeah.
That's a toughie. I've done that, or did that.
He came back and he didn't want to say what Neil said, but he finally relented and said, Neil said that this produces nothing and makes nobody feel good but you. This is artistic masturbation.
Oh, that's one of his favorite. Well, that was one of his favorite lines. He would say to people, "Yeah, I've heard that." He didn't say that to me, but I've heard it. I interviewed with Neil in my third year at the Kubert School. I got an interview at Continuity in New York and went there and showed my portfolio, and it was Neil and it was either his wife or his daughter. I think it was his daughter in the room. And I'll be honest, it was about an hour. I remember how it ended. And it ended basically with him not giving me a script for money, as in here's a job, but basically giving me a script and in his Neil way saying, if you think you can handle it, work up a few of these pages and bring them back.
Okay.
So in other words, you're not there yet, but I'd like to see more samples. But I want to see more samples from a script I give you, not from one that he didn't ask where I came up with the pages. I showed him, but that was it, because basically that was his way of saying, I want to see how you work from a real script, Right.
Sure.
The only reason I never went back is because I got a job at DC, I think like a week later. So, but in all honesty, if I didn't, yeah, I would have worked up those pages. I mean, it was from an issue on Armor. I
Oh, you're
remember
doing
that.
continuity. Yeah.
Yeah, it was from an issue of Armor. I have the actual book that came out and it was after, I think, or I know I got the book after, but I remember getting the book and the first page, I just remember vividly from what the script said. So, but yeah, so in Neil's sarcastic kind of type way, he was like, yeah, if you think you can do it, work something up from these pages, pick a few pages from here and come back.
Okay.
But like I said, I never had to. Now I do remember, like I said, I think it was his daughter in the room looking at, I had an Animal Man cover that I drew, as an assignment for the school in pencil, because everything I took was just pencils in there. And his, he was kind of raging and his hand was up kind of in a position like that. And I remember her saying something about the drawing of the hand, and I'm the type where if you get me, like if you critique something and I really firmly think, yeah, he's right, I'll be like, okay, yeah, no problem. But if you critique something and I think you're wrong, I don't care who you are. So, and plus it wasn't Neil saying it. Like I said, I think it was his daughter in the room. And no offense to her, but I knew her name from coloring, but that was it. I never saw her name credited for drawing anything. I only saw it for coloring. And now I'm not saying colorists aren't artists and don't know how to draw. I'm just saying that's what I knew of her. And my other thought was, well, I'm here talking to your dad. I don't even know why you're in the room. And honestly, I didn't say it, but that's what I thought. And I just pushed back on her and said, I don't know. I think the hand looks fine. And I think I even did this to show her, because I remember for that specific hand, because hands are a bitch to draw. And I was in my third year at the Kubert School, and I'm still have issues drawing certain poses of a hand, not as many as I used to, because obviously you get better. But back then, if it was a difficult hand, I would take a photo or reference in a mirror. And I know that's what I did.
Yeah.
So
if you really want to torture yourself drawing hands, just try to redraw some of Steve Ditko's Doctor Strange, because
oh yeah, dude, those things, yeah. What was that? And it was Spider-Man too. Spider-Man was always a character, and I drew a couple issues with him, but he was never somebody I wanted to draw because of the costume. And it was just the webbing. And it is the thing, once you get it down, you get it down, but it takes a few pages to get it down, like anything. But it was always, drawing the hand, with the fingers basically in, because they're pushing the button to go to squirt out the webbing. That was always like, oh, try to make it interesting and stuff. So
I'm looking at the last tier on here, which is the full figure commission. Still a 7x10, but you're drawing more because you got to draw the full body. And this is penciled and inked, right? This is.
Oh yeah, they're all penciled and inked. Oh yeah. And I always send out, and I'm pretty lenient on this, but I always send out and ask the person to send me 3 characters, and I pick one so they still get a surprise.
Okay.
But kind of like you said, you like that specific Batgirl. I've gotten a few responses where they were like, I really want this character, but here's the other 2. I'm not a dick. If somebody writes that, I usually go with what they really want. I mean, I look, if I go to a convention when I was a kid, hello. I was 15, 16, 14, going to cons, meeting artists. And if I could get them to draw something at a con, they don't do that. At a con, it's, oh, you want a con sketch? What character? And you tell them. And generally, I've never had somebody say no. So once again, the reason I asked for 3 is because I want you to be surprised. But if the person's like, I really want this character, I'm not going to be like, haha, tough, Now, I was at a convention once where it was right after the second Avengers. Yeah, second Avengers movie came out, and it was a blank sketch cover. And I'm like, yeah, I do those. What do you want on it? And it was a figure, and they wanted Iron Man Hulkbuster armor.
Oh, that's a lot.
And I said, not for that price. Because, there's always the caveat on my list. It's not written there, but basically, with what I charge at cons, which is pretty much that, it's like, yeah, that's for what I like to call the baseline type people, a Superman, a Batman, characters like that. But if you're like, I want Cable loaded up with tons of pads and lots of guns, or Hulkbuster Iron Man armor, I'm like, it's going to cost more.
Right.
Because I don't have all day.
Yeah. Well, and the reason I ask is because I know there are other creators who I work with, and they're always asking people to get a full body commission of their character because they want to use it for pinups or trading cards. They want to buy it, full rights. Does something like that come with full rights when you sell it to them? I mean, can they use that as a page in a book later?
Yeah, I mean, I've had a couple people, and just with Core Draft, because these go on every campaign, ask me that, and generally I'm like, yeah, that's fine. I don't, because I still get a kick out of seeing stuff in print, whether it's a trading card or a pinup in a book. I might be a little more weary if they're like a cover because I charge more for covers.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
But if they're like a trading card or just, a pinup in a book, it's still, a trading card, definitely. A pinup in a book, yeah, my rate for that would still be a little higher, but, these also it's not Marvel and DC, and I understand that. So if they're fine with a pinup of basically a figure with possibly no background, I mean, the example there is Penumbra in a bikini. That's what the guy wanted. So I'm like, oh, okay, sure. I'll put her, on a beach with a beach ball. I don't even consider that a background because it takes no time.
It's a circle.
Sure. What I mean is if they're like, my guy flies and I want him flying over a full city, I'm going to be like, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
This is a single figure.
George Perez windows drawn.
Right. I'll be like, no, this is a single figure 7x10. If you want him flying, I could do clouds or the moon.
Yeah.
So
a basic.
So that's kind of why I don't mind if they use it for that. So yeah, I mean, easy answer is yes. But at the same time, I would also say case by case, depending on what the email says, because not everybody might watch this. And if somebody gets that tier and they email me and go, and I'd like to use it as a pinup, and I want this guy fighting with a bunch of ninjas, whatever, I'd be like, yeah, no.
I know this guy here. He specifically is just trying to get his original character to give some extra pages to his graphic novel that he's releasing.
Yeah, no, I don't. I honestly, like I said, I'm easygoing. I've been on that side of the fence, I guess, starting off, whatever. And I still get a kick at it. I would probably say if you send me one of it printed, because I like to own one of everything I've done printed as well, then I'd probably be like, yeah, I don't care. That's fine.
I think that's probably an easy done deal. So I'll just tell him, hey, get this here and tell him.
If I see my little secret, if I'm flipping through dollar boxes at a con, because I still do that, and I find my stuff, depending on the book, I'll know how many I might still have of it. I might buy them. I spent like $20 at a buddy of mine's store looking through his dollar stuff, and I picked up like no, I didn't spend 20. I didn't do that many issues. I spent 10 or 11 because he had every issue of Exo I did in the dollar box. And I'm like, sure, why not? I don't have that many of those. So
yeah, I've gone through the dollar box at an antique store near here and picked up a copy of Arion of Atlantis because I knew flipping to the back when they still had letters pages. My letter was printed in that book.
No shit. That's
Copy
awesome.
of it. Oh, I'm still looking for. I used to have the full run of Swamp Thing, and
Did you read the very first one from the 80s?
yeah. I mean,
Or do you mean the Bernie Wrightston stuff?
Well, I used to have that too,
Mhm.
and I'm working on restoring. There's always a point in every collector's life where everything must go for some reason or another, and I went through that.
I did
So
that.
I'm going back. I'm rebuilding. I've got stuff that I wouldn't let go of. My Green Lantern 40, no, that's in a frame. It wasn't going anywhere.
What's special about 40?
Hal Jordan versus Alan Scott in front of the Guardians, and it was the very first mention
I got
of the
that
Crisis.
one.
Yeah,
I got that one. Yeah. Yeah.
that's
I don't
pretty-
have all,
and then
like,
they've
I would like to have all, because I'm a huge Green Lantern guy. So, I mean, I would love to have not every issue, but I would love to have 1 through 100.
sure.
I have all the Neil Adams issues because I'm a huge Neil Adams guy. I've got from 1 to 76, I probably have 20 or so issues in there, but not, there might be 2 or 3 in order, but then there's a big jump. And, let's be honest, if I owned them, I'd want them to be at least mid-grade or higher. And they're still not cheap. Number 1 is way out of my price range, so I'm glad they reprinted it as a facsimile. But I've got all the reprints in the essential or the showcase black and white. So
Yeah, I was always a big multiverse fan back when they knew how to do it, when it wasn't just a cheat to get you out of something stupid you did. So I got that Green Lantern 40 in a frame. I've got the first JLA JSA crossover. I got those in a frame. And then of course, again, Batgirl. I've got the $1 million debut, the Detective Comics issue in a double frame with the Batman issue of the first Betty Kane Bat-Girl. So it's a double first appearance Batgirl thing there. So,
oh, nice.
And I just won on eBay. Totally worthless comic that I totally overpaid for. But it was Adam number, I want to say 16, but now I can't remember. And it was the first appearance of the Golden Age Adam in the Silver Age Adams book. Their crossover.
No shit.
Here we go. All I need is Flash 123 and I'll be a happy person. That book.
Is 123 the one with him on a cover rushing to the guy with the I-beam falling?
Yes, that was the reintroduction of the Golden Age characters, the Flash of Two Worlds. That was when they
Yep.
That was when they said
That ain't
hey,
cheap.
No, it's $2,000 for a 1.0 copy in CGC.
Is it really?
On eBay it is, yeah. In fact, I saw one. I could get it for maybe $300 for a 0.5.
That's just not worth it. It's just not worth it. Like, I've got a 4.0 of Wiz Comics. It's either, I always forget the issue number. It's either 22 or 24, but it's the only time Captain Marvel and Billy Batson have been on the cover together. It's where they're standing and he's got his arm around
on
him.
his shoulder.
Yeah. I've got a
I know that.
4.0 of that. And it was about $1,000. And it was eBay, and it was, buy now, best offer. And he wanted like 12, I think. And I just was like, let's see if I'll go straight up 1. So I sent that and he did.
Well,
So
good deal for
and
you.
I'll take it. It's a
I've got
4.0,
nothing.
but it's pretty nice looking. So
Yeah, I've never put anything in CGC, but I've got some that I really would think about. Captain Marvel. I've got a Captain Marvel Jr. with a Macra Boy cover on it, where he's on the skis. It's just
oh yeah, I know that one. Yeah.
Macra Boy. There's still artists today that just can't touch that guy.
Oh yeah, dude. Macra Boy, Reed Crandall. Man, those guys were just great. There's a great the Ray when he was Golden Age Ray, yellow costume. DC used him for a little bit. $10 add-on. That's true. Mini prints of what though? Do you mean mini prints of like pages or what? That's the question. I love Randy. He's such a great guy. So the Golden Age Ray, full yellow costume, DC character. There's a great splash page. It's from Smash Comics. I can't remember the number. And it's, has a big shot from like half thigh, so right below the crotch, up of the Ray in the background. So he takes up most of the page, just in a cool standing type pose. And then there's, a vignette of some action and maybe a couple panels. And I'm pretty sure it's Reed Crandall. It is just, I look at that and I'm like, that holds up with anything today. Yeah. A lot of that Golden Age stuff, definitely, the art just doesn't hold up. Not at all. But there are guys like Mac Raboy, Lou Fine, Reed Crandall. Yeah,
the guy who
I'm blanking. But there were guys that definitely their work still holds up today.
Yeah. June Tarpe Mills. She did Miss Fury.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about, but I know the art. I can see it. So,
well, now we're just rambling, and I'm just keeping you on here, and it's 47 minutes past the top of the hour when we were supposed to quit. Oh my God!
No,
Andy,
it's all good.
Sorry.
Don't even worry about it.
Thank you so much for coming on and talking about this, folks. Hit the link below, which will take you to Nice and Tight. If you want to get yourself an art book, and see how it's done before the finishes are done, so you know how to do it yourself, this is the book you want to get. Randy says get mini sketches of top sketch pieces, old covers, splash pages, stuff you got.
What I thought he was talking about.
But anyway, yes, definitely thank you for coming on. Glad to have you anytime you want to be here. Folks in the chat, thank you so much for being here. We don't have a show without you. So, we're just a podcast falling in the woods otherwise. So we're glad you're here. And as always, while you were here, we just hope you had a blast.
I did, man. It was fun. I could do this.
I did too, man. This was great. I was like, I'll be honest with you, going down like it's an art book. What am I going to talk about? Because there's no story to get into. It just flew. So,
it really did. And, talking comics, man, I can do that any day. Just, you brought up a lot of great old stuff. So
24/7 on a 3-day weekend is what I could do it. And that's, again,
yeah, dude.
missing conventions. All right, everybody. Thank you. We'll see you Monday.